Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we continue with Part 16, The Order of the Peacock Angel, from A History of Secret Societies by Arkon Daraul. Chapter 15, The Order of the Peacock Angel. It was a scene that would have delighted the heart of any Sunday newspaper reporter and would have aroused the envy of a master stage designer. Somewhere in Putney, most respectable of London suburbs, 60 men and women were gyrating ecstatically in an underground temple before an 8-foot glossy black statue of a peacock. As I stood in a small gallery built above the floor level, I took note of the pool of water in which the birds' feet rested, the monotonous arabesques of the wall decoration, the crisscross patterns of the stone floor. Rising and falling in an incessant, all-intrusive beat, hidden drums were thudding out a tempo, which made it almost impossible to keep oneself still. Each of the worshippers was robed in a white flowing garment which completely covered his ordinary clothes. On the breast of each was embroidered a peacock, some green, some black, others red. The devotees of the Peacock Angel meet once a fortnight, carry out their complicated rituals, whirl before the effigy of their deity, and return to their respective homes. You would not be able to identify them if you met them outside. No slit-eyed Oriental or turbaned sheikh leads the revels. No obscene rites are practiced. The devil worship attributed to the Yazidis of Kurdistan, who are also peacock followers, is not to be found here. Then why should an otherwise apparently sober and sometimes very ordinary man in the street become a member of a cult like this? What does he get out of it? How is he recruited? The snake and the cock, or peacock, are symbols of power. As such, they are worshipped or propitiated by the Yazidis and have given many a headache of identification to those experts on the Gnostic mysteries who have found them engraved upon seals of uncertain origin in the Middle East. The English version of the cult was brought to Britain by a Syrian who settled in London in 1913. He converted, so runs the tradition of the cult, 5 people of importance: a banker, a member of the peerage, and 3 ladies who were well known at that time as society hostesses. His name is known only to initiates, who introduce it in a disguised form into their conversation. The cult grew in numbers until 16 halqas, lodges, were formed, each with a minimum of 7 members. Essentially, the belief is that there are 2 powers which can be of help to people in everyday life: the powers of increase and of construction. These are known by the coded name of the peacock and the snake, because their names must not be pronounced except by the initiates. The reason for adopting these pseudonyms is that the total of the numbers in the names, worked out by numerology, is equivalent to the numbers of the names of the words peacock and snake. It was this discovery, based upon the numerology of the Arab Kabbalah, which led to the London peacock men and women. I had let it be known that I had heard of their existence, which I had, and that I had something of interest to impart to them, which I had not, through a member who had been introduced to me, and who had mentioned the Yazidis in a general conversation on the Middle East. That he was a priest of the cult became evident when I mentioned the sacred number. The peacock cultist, British branch, did not at that time know that anyone who was reasonably proficient in the Abjad Kabbalah system of the Arabs would be able to decipher their holy name. The aims of the cult are distinctly fraternal. The main objectives are the sharing of the ecstatic experience which follows the operation of the rituals, and mutual help thereafter. These ideas are by no means confined to the peacock people, for they underlie the theories and practices of quite a number of secret societies. What was interesting was to find the cult in London, to make contact, and to be able to witness the ceremonies. Like Sufism, with which it probably has connections in the remote past, the peacock religion embraces the belief that the sharing of the rituals will make the worshippers in some way akin to one another, and also conduce towards the realization of their ambitions. At a certain point in his development, the worshipper becomes enlightened as to what his true vocation is and finds the means to satisfy it. Thus, the organization not only offers what might be called peace of mind in spiritual activity, it purports to bring material success in the mundane world as well. Although they are not by any means missionaries, the cultists do try to attract members. This is in accordance with the belief that progress in the things of the world can be achieved by cooperation as well as by magic. Further, it is believed that the magical practices are more likely to succeed if there is a community within which they can be given expression. It was put to me thus: if 3 members of the cult get together and decide that they are to progress in the world, they may find that they have a call to open, say, a shop. If they have the confidence that this is likely to succeed, and if they give the peacock power the environment, the shop, in which to work, it cannot fail. If nothing goes on to which anyone might take exception, why is the cult so shy? Why is its very existence kept secret? In the first place, much uninformed literature on the subject says that the worshippers of the peacock are devil worshippers. The origin of their belief is the Muslim intolerance under the Turks, which labeled these schismatics infidels. They are not allowed to use the name of Satan, and it is blacked out in their books. This is because they are allowed only to think of good and must not retain the idea of evil in their minds. Secondly, the high priest told me the organization is pledged to maintain secrecy because there has been no society and no country in which ecstatics have not been subjected to persecution. We must be allowed to operate for ourselves and with ourselves. We are not interested in casual onlookers and press sensationalism. The nature of the ecstatic experience, which is attained by the members, is of course the kernel of the whole thing, but let us start from the beginning. Members are expected to be on the watch for possible recruits. The theory is that there is, deep down inside almost everyone, a feeling that he is unfulfilled. This fulfillment is sought in the career, in promotion, in money, in marriage or hobbies, but there remain a large number of individuals who do not attain it. These are the prospective members of any cult, and especially of the peacock people. In conversation, the member is to find out the mental attitude of the prospective recruit. What are his hopes and fears? What are his weaknesses and strengths? What his goal in life? Reports on these people are submitted to the high priest, providing that the potential member is not deeply in debt or thought to have any unusual or perverted interests, and once he has developed an interest in fulfilling himself, he can be put on the list of candidates for missionary development. People who already have a metaphysical commitment or leanings towards spiritualism or organized religion in any form are barred. The candidate is asked whether he would like to take part in group discussions or demonstrations of contemplation and concentration based upon an Eastern model. If he agrees, he begins to attend meetings at which he is developed. This development takes the form of going through exercises which give him the power to direct his mind at will upon certain thoughts and exclude others. If he is interested in hypnotism, he may be taught this, with the reservation that the group's attitude towards hypnosis is that it is of limited value except in the early stages of spiritual development. He brings his problems to the leader of the circle. These difficulties are met in discussion, in training how to overcome worry and confusion, again by concentration and meditation. The entire program of mind training is leading the candidate towards the mystical experience, although he may not yet be aware that this is so, or even that such a thing exists. If he finds, as he generally does, that he is deriving benefit from this form of psychotherapy, he is told that he can progress further, but that in order to do so, he must place himself completely in the hands of the master of the circle, the high priest. At this point, some candidates fall out of the running, partly no doubt because quite a number of people object to being told exactly what to do. The remainder, however, carry on. The next part of the training is to carry out specific exercises, both mental and physical, in a graduated course, until he can fill his mind with various emotions at will: joy, fear, optimism, a sensation of power. He is given words to repeat before going to sleep. Any dreams are to be carefully noted, for these are looked upon as omens and are interpreted in accordance with fixed rules by the master or guide, his assistant. There is no carefully worked out theology in the movement. The peacock represents the power which is in charge of human affairs, and anyone who wants to enter the fold must believe that there is such a power. One talked to several members who said that they had been recruited at a stage before this, however. They were curious to know how various of their friends were able to battle with life without flinching, were able to achieve what others could not, and so on. They asked and were brought straight into the instructional phase, at which there is no preaching, only practice of exercises. When the exercises seemed to work, they were told that it was through the power which was called the Peacock Angel. There are probably several hundred members throughout Britain, and I was told of 3 lodges in the United States. Some of the members have live peacocks, which they keep as symbols of the path upon which they have embarked. After the ceremony just mentioned, worshippers and guests were ushered into a large, well-furnished room where refreshments, no alcohol, were laid out on buffet tables. They had removed their outer robes and stood revealed as ordinary men and women, much like the type whom one might meet at a better kind of cocktail party in the West 1 district of London. The sign of identification, I am pretty sure, is thus. The right hand is placed, with the fingers spread out, perhaps to represent the tail of the peacock, on the left breast, just above the heart. The countersign may have been stroking the chin with the left hand. The latter signal is one which has been in use for many centuries among mystical fraternities of the Middle East, from which the London peacock people have undoubtedly derived their rituals and probably their beliefs as well. In the Middle East, the chin is stroked with the right hand. Out of the 60 members whom I saw at this meeting, none looked like a foreigner, none of the working class. Nobody seemed on superficial inspection to be the wild-eyed crank type. Prayers are said in private to a small, probably silver image of a peacock. These, or such of them as were shown to me, did not seem to ask for much else than enlightenment, material progress, and mystical experience. When it is desired to attain an objective of a more specific sort, special rituals are used of a magical type. I asked the high priest about black magic and evil wishing. Black magic is an appeal to the power of evil. We believe that evil is not a power in its own right, but an unhealthy force which can be built up in a man's or woman's mind. Therefore, we do not give it a place in our thoughts. To think about it would be to admit its existence and give it reality and focus. Therefore, the devil does not exist for us. Those who revere evil are as bad as those who fear or hate it. We ignore it completely. The same answer gives you the explanation why we cannot indulge in evil spells and the like. They must not exist because we do not allow evil to exist in us. Since we are aiming at removing the evil from people's minds, we cannot allow thoughts of it to enter. The thoughts which we have are all constructive. How was the Order of the Black Peacock financed? There was certainly a good deal of evidence that money was being spent upon it. You will see, said the priest, one way in which money comes to the shrine, and you can draw your own conclusions from it. But I may tell you that this organization is not run for profit. When members make money as a result of any activity for whose success they have prayed to the peacock, they pay 2.5% of that to the shrine. This money they keep in their own possession, and they lay it out for objectives which are decided by the council. Who were the council? The council changes every year on the occasion of our spring festival, the first Wednesday in April. There are 2 representatives for every 20 members. Elections are among all the members. I suppose that the priests had an automatic seat on the council. Not at all. In this year's council, for instance, there is no priestly member. Did the order hold much property? No, it seemed none. Who then financed a meeting such as this one? In rotation of surname initials, the members who have accumulated profits from the intervention of the peacock in their business and professional affairs. I had been interested for many years in ecstatic religion and was determined, if I could, to be allowed to see the exact method by which the members worked themselves up into a frenzy, and what happened then. It shall be as you desire, said the priest. You are in any case invited to the earth. This word is the standard one for the festival of a patron saint in Arabic and Persian. 10 days later, I was picked up at Clapham Common Underground Station after a telephone message. It seemed that there was still some doubt as to whether I was working for a newspaper or might in some way let out what little I had learned. In any case, the number plates on the car which met me were well covered with mud, and the homely but self-possessed woman sitting in the back kept me talking all the time we were travelling to the scene of the meeting. Do you swear on every holy book, upon your honour, upon the life and death of yourself and those dearest to you, without reservation, that you will not give others the opportunity of contacting us, that you will treat our cult with respect, that you will help, not hinder us in anything connected with us, while you are convinced that we are worthy of this trust and this consideration? I do. In the growing dusk, the house to which we were driven seemed an ordinary small suburban one. Inside, it was neat and clean and showed that it was a place of no great size. My friend the high priest was there, in the front room, sitting with about 10 more or less serious-faced people, some of whom I recognized from the original meeting. There were new faces too. A tiny oil lamp burned in a niche by the door. Newcomers passed their hands over it to purify themselves, as the Kurds do. We were given green tea, small cakes with icing upon them. The talk was general and seemed to be commercial rather than anything else. Any group of people, I thought, perhaps uncharitably, who met regularly and helped each other in business affairs and who believed as firmly that there was a special supernatural blessing upon their activities, would achieve prosperity in the long run. There were sounds of music from the next room, but much less insistent than before. One by one, the members rose and excused themselves. I sat and talked with a barrister and an accountant about my days with the dervishes in Asia and Africa, and found that they were most interested. They seemed to feel that there was a point of contact. Presently, about half an hour after we had started tea, the priest took me by the arm. "The time has come for me to go in." A short passage led to the other reception room of the house. As we reached the door, he removed his shoes, and I did the same. Inside, sitting on small hassocks and swaying in time to the music, were the other members of the cult. In one corner stood a smaller peacock statue, standing on a large bronze vessel of water. The water was distinctly bubbling. In one corner sat the musician, playing a guitar, from which a haunting melody seemed to creep through me. Its effect upon the rest of the congregation was even more remarkable. The hassocks were arranged in a semicircle around the image of the bird. Some of the figures which sat upon them had their faces covered by their hands, others swayed with the eyes closed. Still others had their hands clasped around their legs. About half were women, their ages between 20 and 30. As I watched, a man stood up, moved towards the statue, and threw a rolled-up piece of paper into the water. Nothing happened for a few minutes as he took his place again among the worshippers, in his eyes a faraway look. Then a woman, with smiling face and hands beating out the melody on her sides, approached the silent bird and said, "Thank you, thank you." The same kind of action was repeated by several more worshippers. After 30 minutes, I noticed that half the people had left the room. Meanwhile, my priest had apparently fallen into a trance. He sat on the floor, his body rigid, eyes staring, unwinkingly open. Someone about to leave the room accidentally touched him and became rigid in his turn, slowly sinking down upon his knees, his muscles stiffening, eyes turned towards the peacock. Being a witness to a scene such as this is sure to have some effect upon the observer. I noted that if I looked at the statue and listened to the music, I felt wave upon wave of something sweeping over me. Whether this is suggestion or not, it was actually taking place in the only place that mattered. My mind, and the mind was influencing the body into greater and greater rigidity. I found that I could inhibit this process by looking at something else. Finally, I decided to allow the experience to take shape. I would partake of the mystery of the power of the peacock. One did not lose consciousness, I found. The mind became more and more awake, while the body seemed to recede in some way into complete unimportance. The sensation, as it grew, was one of the most ineffable relief, of joy or happiness, such as one had only felt before in moments of exceptional fulfillment. Time had no meaning. There was nothing in the mind except the desire to allow this blissful state to continue, for it seemed to pour fresh strength into me. I was able at the same time to take some note of what was going on around me, and also to think, if one wished, of other things. The first extraordinary development within my thinking was that when I let myself think about a certain problem, the solution suddenly flashed into my mind. This had the same quality of certainty that exists when one dreams that one has settled one's worries. The difference this time was that the solution was in fact correct, and I was able to act upon it later. The second phenomenon was a vast expansion of memory. Trying to recall a time about which my memory was slight, I fixed upon a moment many years ago when I was carrying out a study of symbols used in ancient cultures. Anyone who has had the difficulty of absorbing and correlating masses of almost meaningless designs would understand how I felt when I suddenly realized that these shapes were whirling past my mind like an unreeling film. There was all the material available whenever I wanted to see it, stop it, reel it back, Had I been doped? I examined this thought at leisure. Yes, it was possible. I could test this by not eating or drinking anything next time, if there was to be a next time. Meanwhile, I tried to recall the symptoms of the use of various drugs, and the whole complicated data which I had read and discussed years ago flashed back into my amazing new mind. Yet I could not account for the symptoms unless I was in such a state that I was in no condition to seek them in myself, physically speaking. There was no disturbance of sight, no vomiting, no sweating, no apparent difference in the heartbeat, no sensation of lying, no shortness of breath, no distortion as far as I could see in thought. Was it hypnosis? It was easy enough to think that it might be, but no form of hypnotism is conclusively known without suggestion, in spite of what the sensational novelists say. It is easy to use such phrases as suggestibility induced by drugs, but any experimenter knows that the effects vary, and also that the phrase has less meaning than it seems to have. If I were drugged or hypnotized, I would be able to see by one test. Could I rouse myself, then slip back into the state at will? I tried, and I could. Then there was the matter of idiosyncrasy, which the would-be dopers could not know. I was, for example, a very difficult hypnotic subject. Further, my tolerance to drugs is so low that in all cases of narcotics being administered to me, I have had a most severe hangover and cannot be roused easily. I decided, therefore, to rouse myself and go to the other room to see what my symptoms might be then. I stood shaking off the influence, whatever it was. In an instant, all seemed clear again. Opening the door, I moved quietly through the passage, where a number of Peacock people were sitting, talking in low tones. I sat down on a settee. Nothing seemed in any way changed. There was no explanation. The roots of the Peacock Angel cult in the West must be sought at the sanctuary of Sheikh Adi, north of Mosul, in Iraq. In spite of what Madame Blavatsky, who claimed to have visited them, said, the Yazidi Peacock people are in fact Kurds, and their language is Kurdish. The name by which they style themselves is taken from the old Persian word aizd, meaning originally something which is to be worshipped, and their reputation as devil worshippers has melted before the light of modern scholarship. The Turks, who tried to convert them to Orthodox Islam, and the Western missionaries, who are somewhat baffled by their rites, are mainly responsible for the label of demonolatry, which stuck in many a popular imagination to produce a good deal of lurid fiction. The journalistic Blavatsky is at her most imaginative in the following, which she evidently claimed to be based upon a visit to the Yazidis. They are called and known everywhere as devil worshippers, and most certainly it is not either through ignorance or obscuration that they have set up the worship of and a regular intercommunication with the lowest and most malicious of both elementals and elementaries. They recognize the present wickedness of the chief of the Black Powers, but at the same time they dread his power and try to conciliate to themselves his favors. They join hands and form immense rings with their sheikh or an officiating priest in the middle, who claps his hands and intones every verse in honor of Shaitan. Then they whirl and leap in the air. When the frenzy is at its climax, they often wound and cut themselves with their daggers. They coax and praise Shaitan and entreat him to manifest himself in his works by miracles. As their rites are chiefly accomplished by night, they do not fail to obtain manifestations of a varied character, the least of which are enormous globes of fire, which take the shapes of the most uncouth animals. The authoress of Isis Unveiled, Volume 2, p. 571, from which this extract is taken, evidently did not feel herself bound by the limitations of the human knowledge of her day. But the Yazidis are at least partly responsible for the misunderstanding. It is only relatively recently that they have explained to all and sundry that they will not pronounce the word Shaitan, Satan, because the very use of the sound, they think, is associated with the power of evil. Satan, they hold, was a fallen archangel whose period of power over mankind was limited. He is now rehabilitated and influences the affairs of man in both good and bad ways. The force of evil is disappearing with his guilt, but it can be contacted and delayed in this disappearance by those who think about it. Who actually was their founder? Oddly enough, Sheikh Adi is one of the most sanctified Sufi mystics of the 11th century. As the authoritative encyclopedia of Islam has it, it seems strange that the Yazidis, should have chosen as a national saint a Sufi sheikh like Adi B. Musafir, recognized without qualification throughout the whole Mohammedan world, whose orthodoxy, as we find it in his works, could hardly have led to the foundation of a sect so heterodox and foreign to the nature of Islam as Yazidism actually is. But it is possible that the esoteric teaching which is carefully preserved by the Sufis might have been passed on in the case of followers of Adi in this form. Certain it is that some of their beliefs and practices are similar to those known to the Sufis. The Yazidis are superficially organized in a manner similar to the Sufi dervishes, and the similarities which have been pointed out between them and the Buddhists are probably derived from Sufi origins. The laity are all termed murids, disciples, because the entire nation is considered to be composed of would-be initiates. The clergy are called kahanas, mystical leaders, or else ruhan, which is a term signifying those who can enter a deep trance. The ordering of the various ruhans closely follows Sufism. The sheikhs are all descended from Adi and wear white robes and black turbans. They form the highest class of ascetic. Under them come the pirs, ancients or sages, black-robed with white turbans, while the fakirs, or ordinary ecstatics, form the rank and file of the mystics. They also have a sisterhood called the fakraya, the little poor ones. No outsider is allowed to see the secret rites of the Yazidis on their own ground, but there is little doubt in the minds of those who have been partial witnesses that the rituals follow more or less closely the symbolism of Sufism. The daily ordinary ritual consists of hailing the sunrise and then circumambulating a stone which has been placed upon the ground. This stone is inscribed with the name of Malak Taus, the Peacock Angel, and the ritual is not thought to be a form of worship. A Yazidi told a Sufi initiate whom he mistook for a co-religionist, "Let us remember the force of the good and the bad which are one, and let us now stand before it and move around our stone." They believe in reincarnation, and that to be born again as an animal is an indication that one has lived an evil life. Those who have lived good lives are reincarnated as human beings. They receive messages from the peacock in a manner quite similar to spiritualistic ones, which tell them of their former lives and explain how past experiences can help them in the current incarnation. There is a legend that large numbers of reincarnated Yazidis live in the West, but why this should be so, nobody knows. One of the more secret rituals concerns both the reaching of a satisfactory ritual and also contact with this Western group. 6 dancers, Kochek, and 3 singers, Korwal, assemble in an enclosed place before one of the 7 important portable peacock statues. A chant is started by one of the singers, taken up by the others. It begins with the long drawn-out repetition of the words Malik Taus and continues with the rapid repetition of the 4 syllables. When these proceedings have been continued for about 100 repetitions, the dancers light 17 small oil lamps, which they place in a circle in which the worshippers assemble. Before the rite, all are in a state of ritual purity, having put on a single clean garment. Men and women do not mix in this observance. Now the dancers begin to gyrate, moving slowly around the outside of the circle in an anti-clockwise direction. They say nothing, but their arms move and the palms of the hands are rubbed together. As the pace quickens, the repetitions get louder. Soon the ordinary murids begin to shake or to appear paralyzed. When the latter, they always sit facing the peacock emblem. It is believed that during this ritual, much merit is acquired, which will help towards improving the character and thus leading to a human incarnation and a westerly destination. Figure F, Yazidi emblem used as power talisman. The Sufi idea of baraka, transmitted magical power, literally meaning a blessing, is also held by the Yazidis. Thus it is that a person who's thought to have such power is sought after and asked to place his hands, in the manner of the early mesmerists, in front of the eyes of the murid. This is described as drawing down the blessing. The focus of the religion is the former Christian monastery of Lalesh, where Sheikh Adi lived his last years surrounded by disciples and zealously performing miracles. This is the shrine to which pilgrimages take place. This too is where the shiny black snake, symbolizing regeneration and reincarnation, lies, carved against the portal of the sacred precincts. The snake is blackened each morning with the soot from the olive oil lamps which are kept perpetually burning. The symbolism of this is that the soot is the product of the oil, which does not die, as nothing really dies. It is but changed. The baptism, which is a part of Yazidi ceremonies, is not an essential feature, but is a symbolic act of dedication by the person being baptized. This is reflected in the words which are used by the officiating priest. As in this clean water you purify yourself, so shall you cast off sin, as evil has been cast off from the world and exists not except in the minds of the evildoers. Therefore be this your resolve reaffirmed, not to think evil. There is an institution of heavenly relationship, somewhat reminiscent of the system of godparents. Each devotee of the cult has a brother or a sister, another brother or other sister, drawn from the families of the priestly class. Figure G, Yazidis, recognition signals made with the hands. 1. Degree of disciple. 2. Degree of ecstatic. 3. Degree of priest. 4. Degree of sheikh. Upon being initiated into the sect, the devotee is given a thick woolen cloak, such as the Sufis use, which is worn next to the skin. A holy thread of intertwined black and red wool is put around the neck. Like the sacred thread of the Parsis and other ancient Middle Eastern cults, this must never be removed. And it sounds like the cord that the Templars were accused of wearing when the order was suppressed as heretic. A bright red woven wool girdle is worn around the kirka, cloak of the order. This initiation follows a fast of 40 days and a ritual bathing which symbolically removed all past sins from the would-be fakir. At least until recently, the Peacock people of Europe had little contact with their opposite numbers in the East. The main difference seems to be that the Western branch is less interested in the reincarnation belief. Whether Sheikh Adi, when he left his mystical school to carry on in the 13th century, foresaw the strange developments which took place within the order in the Levant and the stranger ones in England and elsewhere, seems unlikely indeed. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.